topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Welcome back to Working on Purpose, which has been brought to you with passion and pride since February of 2015 already. Thanks for tuning in again this week. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. If we have not met before and you don't know me, I'm a workforce advisor, organizational psychologist, management consultant, logotherapist, speaker, and author. My team and I at Gusto now help companies to enliven and fortify their operations by building a dynamic, high-performance culture, inspirational leadership, and nurturing managers activated by meaning and purpose. Did you know that inspired employees in purpose-led organizations outperform their satisfied peers by a factor of 2.25 to 1? In other words, purpose and inspiration are good for the bottom line. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at gusto-now.com or visit my personal site, elisecortez.com. With us today, we have Ken Lizotte. He is the founder and CEO of Emerson Consulting Group, a consulting firm helping establish thought leadership and professionals of all types. He's the author of 8 books and the editor of 2 more. We'll be talking about his book, Walden for Hire, Business Lessons from Henry David Thoreau. Specifically, we'll talk about his vast work experience and philosophy of work and life, his work as an entrepreneur and inventor in his family pencil business, and the school he founded, all of which give us a fresh perspective on business today. He joins us today from Concord, Massachusetts, the hometown of Henry David Thoreau, where he lives just a few miles shy of Walden Pond. Ken, welcome to Working on Purpose.
Well, thank you for inviting me to be on Working on Purpose.
Most welcome. And let us celebrate this wonderful creation you brought into the world, shall we? Look at this. You've got one. Look, you've got it.
Ready?
Yeah, it looks a lot like that one.
I have to correct you on one thing in my bio.
Oh, please.
You let everybody know that I live in Concord, Massachusetts, but I don't live in Concord, Massachusetts. I live in Concord, Massachusetts.
Concord.
You say it around here, Concord.
Concord. Okay, I thank you for. That's a very important correction. I stand corrected. Okay.
You know the big university near here is Harvard.
Harvard, yeah, Harvard.
Yeah.
I'll work on my A's, Ken.
Right. Good.
Okay, so here we are already celebrating Henry David Thoreau and Walden Pond. We got to start by orienting our listeners and viewers as to why in the heck that you were so drawn to researching Henry David Thoreau. I mean, I realize you're in his neighborhood, you're in his backyard, but beyond that.
Well, I moved to Concord about 30 years ago.
Okay.
And, I honestly didn't know that much about Henry back then. But when you live here, you learn about him in dribs and drabs. You learn about Louisa May Alcott in dribs and drabs, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and Hawthorne, all these people that were all hanging out together back in the mid 1800s. And so you learn a little bit, but what really happened with me is that I got asked to become a part of the Thoreau Farm birthplace house, the place where Henry was born. And that's here in Concord. And I was asked to be on the board of directors. And it was at a time in my life when it felt like the right thing to do. So I immediately said yes and started going to meetings, but not necessarily understanding much about Henry David Thoreau himself. Again, it sort of dribs and drabs until what really happened is I became president at one point, and I was president, ended up being the president of the board for 10 years. And so you learn more and more and more. But my day job, my company, Emerson Consulting Group, helps business experts today become published thought leaders, and they're in business is my specialty to work with. So I have the business on my mind during the day, and at night, once a week or once a month, I would go to these meetings where it's not business at all. It's about Henry this and Henry that, Henry environmentalism, and Henry the writer, and Henry the a saunterer around Walden Woods, and all these kinds of things. And one day it just snapped. Something happened. I just saw it because I would see these various authors come and go and talk about their new book, and learn about. It's always this. I don't mean to say they're mundane themes, but they tended to repeat themselves. And the nature, ecology, writing, and like that. And something happened where I said, wait a minute, what about business? I'm thinking about business all day long. What about Henry and business? And it got me thinking that I should look into it. And the more I did, the more I found, again, dribs and drabs of Henry relating to business. So I'm sitting at the Thoreau Farm house one day, and there are a couple of people that I'd been working with on the board for a few years who knew a lot about Thoreau. And I said to them, I've been thinking about writing a book about Henry as a business expert. And their first instinct, both of them, very knowledgeable people, is to sort of laugh at that.
I knew it had to be laughter. Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought that was interesting. It just made me more interested to pursue this. So I started to do some research, and it really didn't take long for me to realize that I was really onto something. There's never has been a book on this theme, Henry David Thoreau as a business expert. In the 170 plus years since he left this earth, so many thousands of essays and so many thousands of books have been written, but about him, but none of them had the laser focused theme of him as a business expert. And it took me a while to do this, to research it at all. But, as you and I just proved to everybody, that's a book. It's a real book, and there's a lot in there. And I covered 18 chapters with Henry as a business expert. So that's how it all came about.
Well, that's it. You've inspired me to write my next book, and it's going to have to be on what we can learn from Garfield, the cartoon character, on inspiration, right? That's where it has to be next. If you've just inspired me.
I got the subtitle, Moments of Inspiration from Garfield.
Well, I love it, right? Isn't this fun? Oh, see, you wonder why I keep hosting the show after all these 11 years, right? I just have these kinds of conversations. Well, just quickly for our listeners and viewers who haven't read your book and don't know Thoreau, I call him Thoreau. You're calling him Thoreau.
Yeah, I should say something about that.
Yes, please.
He was actually born David Henry Thoreau, and as he got it, I don't know how old, maybe late teens or early 20s. For some reason, he decided he wanted to switch the first two names, not David Henry, but Henry David. And then as he got thinking about his last name, he liked the sort of French pronunciation better, Thoreau, rather than Thoreau.
Okay, this is so good. A bunch of things I'm learning.
And most people don't know that. I didn't know it until a long time. And it's Henry David Thoreau.
Thoreau. Well, so I also was dazzled by just the sheer quantities, different kinds of work that he had done in his life. If you could just kind of give us a short tour, or at least labels of what he did. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but just coming to give us a breadth of the stuff this man was up to.
Yeah, well, one of the things in the book is that the chapters, I break the chapters up into these various jobs. And,
you do? I think it's delightful.
And it's easier for me to go to the table of contents and and read through them quickly if I can find it now. Of course, I can't with them on. There we go.
I've got a list here
If
too.
I'm on camera, I can't, but yeah, no, I've got the page, and just for me to scan it myself. He was a builder. People know about his cabin on the shores of Walden Ponds, and he did that himself. And he also helped other people that he knew in Concord to build things or renovate the houses and that sort of thing. He was a farmer. He was a farmer because he didn't own that land that he was on. Ralph Waldo Emerson was a mentor of his, and Waldo, as he was called, had owned the land and made a deal with Henry that if Henry would start a garden,
the green beans, yes,
that he would give the beans to Waldo for his family, and some of them he could keep to himself or his own family, whatever. But that was part of his deal there. So he's a farmer, and in farming, he was always inventing new ways to go about things that farmers had done for centuries, eons, and he was always looking to see how could he improve on it. And he was actually able to improve in a sort of a minor way. It wasn't a big farm, but a few acres. He would have enough for Waldo and his family. He would have enough for his own family. Both of them are 5, 6, 7 people in each family, and then for himself. And then there's some left over. And he'd take the ones that were left over, and he went to the market in the center of Concord, like a lot of the farmers did, and he just set up shop and sold what he had left over. He claimed that he was making more money profit ratio than the farmers that had been there for a long time. Mm-hmm. Well, and this is one of the things you have to take his word for it, because there isn't a lot of documentation otherwise. But farming was another thing. And then just really quickly, he was a surveyor, and he became the chief surveyor of Concord after a number of years, proving how great he was. He was a public speaker. He was a scientist, naturalist. He was a inventor. I'm waving this pencil.
Yes, the pencil.
This pencil is called, and we all know what these are called because we've all used them and still use them, a number 2 pencil. Well, pencils have a lot of different numbers. This is something I learned in the course of investigating this. But pencils were really bad back in those days. Even the good pencils, the best pencils, they were sloppy, and they didn't necessarily write, or they didn't write consistently, and they could get all over your hands and leak down a page, and there were all kinds of problems. And yet people accepted that, because that was how a pencil was. Mm-hmm. Henry he didn't accept that, and in his father's pencil factory, which produced good pencils and did well, but again, the kind that I just described, he said there's got to be a better way. So he thought about it and thought about it, and then thought he should do some research. So he went to his alma mater, Harvard, and he spent a few days, maybe a week or 2 there, just hitting the books, learning all he could about pencils. And he found that in Europe, pencil makers did things differently, and they did it in such a way that their pencils were very reliable. So by looking at that, he brought the recipe for the lead mixture inside a pencil, and a few experiments and all, and even creating a contraption that would create this leaden dust that was very fine and would float in the air and come down where he needed to capture it. And anyway, long story short, he reinvented the pencil, and it's the same pencil. This is the same approach that we use today. So these are the things: farmer and inventor and builder.
Writer. Let's not forget writer, right? And that as well, poet and
Well, writer was important to him too. In a way, this book is sort of his journey toward having a dream career manifest itself. And in the early days when he was thinking about what did he really want to do in life, he chose what a lot of writers chose in those days, and that was to be a poet. And he was very good at being a poet, and he was very passionate about it. But then, like now, poets didn't really make much money. Mm-hmm. So while you could find a few instances of them becoming famous and making money and making a living, most of the time they didn't. So he had the same problem. He would write his poems and submit them, and sometimes they'd get published, sometimes they didn't necessarily pay him much of anything. But that was his first step toward his dream career. Mm-hmm. Just the arc of the book is to finally get it to a point where he had given that up as the number one dream career, and writing books and essays was the most important thing.
And I love how you revered him. We will talk more about that as we go, but let's grab our first break. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We're on the air with Ken Lizotte. He is the founder and CEO of Emerson Consulting Group, a consulting firm helping establish thought leadership to professionals of all types. We've been talking about where this book came from, his obsession with Thoreau, and also a bit of his life and who he was as a human. After the break, we're going to talk a bit more about some of the things that he did in his work and what we can learn from those as leaders and business people. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, as I am dedicated to helping create a world where organizations thrive because their people thrive. They're led by inspirational leaders that help them find and contribute their greatness, and we do business in a way that betters the world. I keep researching and writing my own books. So one of my latest came out, and it's called The Great Revitalization, How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. And I wrote it to help leaders understand today's discerning workforce. What do they want and need from you to give you their best? And then I provide you 22 best practices to equip you to instill it into your culture and your leadership to keep them. You can find my books on Amazon or on elisecortez.com. If you are now just joining us, my guest is Ken Lizotte. He is the author of 8 books and the editor of another 2. Today we're talking about his book, Walden for Hire, Business Lessons from Henry David Thoreau. Before we get into a little bit of his work here, I would be remiss if we didn't just sort of remind our listeners and viewers a passage that he's incredibly known for. So I'd love to read it from your book. So this is where you're helping us remember Henry's own reasoning for camping out for 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days on the tranquil shores nearby Walden Pond. You quote him as saying, "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not when I came to die discover that I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life, living in so dear, maybe dire, nor did I wish to practice the resignation unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms." That is just so powerful.
And it's what a lot of us feel. It's what a lot of us feel frequently. And that's where another famous quote of his, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation.
Desperation.
Yeah. And that's something that he never wanted to do. And he did everything he could to prevent that from happening. But he was so critical and sad, really, in a way, that wherever he would look and he would see people around him right here in this town, that they were spending. This is going to sound familiar to a lot of people, but that they were spending so much time on a job that they didn't particularly love, and but why did they do it? Because they had bills to pay.
Mm-hmm.
Mortgages to pay, you have car payments, you have to take your dog to the vet, all these things. And Henry said in the very beginning of his book, Walden, that people should pay attention to what he called the necessaries of life, not the necessities. He didn't use that word for whatever reason, necessaries. And those were things like, what are the things that we can, that are necessary? And they were pretty basic, they were food, of course, and warmth. Warmth was a big one. There were a few others, but I always find warmth kind of interesting because it not only did he mean the warmth of the heating system, like in his cabin, he had a stove, a wood stove, but clothing, for example, he considered clothing was necessary for the warmth as much as anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So how basic can you be so that you're not having to have all these bills that are eating you up and that are, they seem so important, but in fact, he has another quote, and I don't know if I can remember it precisely, but it had to do with the idea that a person is successful in inverse ratio to the things that they can let go or leave behind, or not basically not be enslaved to.
Mm-hmm. I remember that. I really appreciate that. To bring that whole idea of more of the necessities in life to modern day, I saw a delightful clip on LinkedIn that somebody had written up, and this woman was writing about how, with all this inflation, that she needed to start cutting corners and chopping things off the budget. And she said she was sitting around with her family one night watching TV, and the kids went to turn the TV on, went to go to their favorite channel, and it wasn't working. And the mom said, "Well, I canceled that." And so they said, okay, they went to go to the next channel, and the same thing, it wasn't working. And they looked again at her, she's like, "I canceled that." And so then by the third time that they got to a channel that she had canceled, her kids turned to her and said, "Are you dying?" It was just so funny, though. It's just this idea that he's talking about those kinds of things. And today, of course, we're talking about canceling, TV channels, basically,
Right.
get us down to a more, necessary subsistence.
Well, Henry never watched cable TV. He had no interest in it.
I suppose not. Yeah.
Think about it back then. No radio, no this, no Zoom, no.
And to put that into context, we're talking about when he lived on Walden Pond. That was 1845. So it's important for listeners and viewers to recognize just the period we're talking about here. It's just amazing what he did.
Right.
And all the more. So here's another fascinating thing that I loved about your book, Ken. I didn't know that the man went to Harvard. So after graduating from Harvard, he lands this teaching job, and it's in the time period, $500 a year was considered a lot of money, and he's like, hit the jackpot. So tell the story about what was that experience, and it didn't last long. So help us understand what happened there.
Well, Henry went into this job. First of all, he was just out of college, out of Harvard, and there was a depression at the time, an economic depression, which back in those days they called a panic. I wonder why. Why do we ever let go of that word, by the way, as far as that goes? But the Panic of 1837, he was graduated, and there were no jobs, so he looking for one, but he couldn't find one, and he couldn't get an offer or anything. And then lo and behold, somebody who knew somebody in Concord said, we're looking for somebody to teach an elementary school here, and I think you'd be good for it. And he recommended Henry for the job, and he got the job. Now he's only out of college maybe a few months, and he's suddenly got a job where other people, looking hard for a job, not getting anywhere. So he takes the job, and one of the things he was happy about was that there had been a decision in Concord that they would do away with what most schools use for discipline, and that's corporal punishment. You would not have to do that as a teacher. That was very important to Henry. So he took the job, and he did the best he could to learn. I don't know how many teachers we have out there, but I was a substitute teacher for like 3 or 4 days early in my life because I said, what am I doing here? This is just it's keeping everybody quiet rather than really teaching. And I think that Henry had the same experience. He had a little bit of an unruly classroom at times. So one day, the head of the school committee in Concord came to sit in the back of the room and see how he was doing. And they were watching this kind of craziness that went on, which Henry was able to handle, by the way. He could see it as being a creativity experiment, let's say. And anyway, this school committee head said, no, you can't do that. You got to do something here. This is not the way to keep kids in line. And so you're going to have to start slapping them on the wrist or the hand, even though that was not the official policy. And Henry just couldn't believe that he was being asked to do this. And he got so upset with it. He did it to a couple of the kids, wrapped them on the wrist and the knuckles or whatever, and sent them back to their seats and their chairs crying. But it didn't sit with him. It wasn't, he didn't feel like he could keep doing it. So the very same day after school was out, he went to this superintendent's office and said, I quit. 10 days, he quit. Because right then and there, that was going over the line for him. He couldn't buy it. In the end, he ended up not getting another teaching job where he was going to be having to live day by day by someone else's rules. But he did become a teacher again when he and his brother founded a private school in Concord.
Before you go into that next school, I want to emphasize the couple of lessons out of that, because I wanted to speak separately about that school. That what I took to be out of the lessons, and you sort of do talk about in your book too, is the lesson from him leaving that very, very, very high-paying, lucrative job that suited what he wanted to do, et cetera, in the world, was he did not want to leave his morals behind. He was not willing to set aside his morals for a big pot of money. And I have met many people over my lifetime who have sold their soul for the pot of money. And so I really appreciated that he stuck to that. I just wanted to really celebrate that before we talk about the academy piece, because him starting the academy, I thought, was such and the way you describe it in your book, such a vindication of all of that. So beautiful what they did. So now, please.
The old expression, one door closes, another one opens.
Right.
And that's kind of what happened there. He didn't just walk right into that idea. That took a little while for it to foment in his brain. But he did like kids. One thing about him is he really did. He never got married and never had kids of his own, but he really did like children, and he could relate to them and play with them and teach them and inspire them and all of that. So he had this idea about starting his own school, and so he did. And there were some prominent people in Concord who appreciated who Henry was and what they thought he might accomplish. in this regard, and they sent their own kids to go and be part of his school. And so it started to fill up. And what he did there was it wasn't so much learning by rote or just the 3 R's or when he was at Harvard, back in those days when you were in college, you were spending most of your time learning other languages, Italian and French and Spanish, etc. But anyway, he started, he created his own curriculum, and his curriculum had to do with, there was some of the reading, writing, arithmetic type of thing, but half of the day was very often spent doing what he loved to do in particular, and that's trekking down to Walden Pond and through the woods there that we call the Walden Woods, and stopping with the kids and saying, anybody, what do you see right here? And they would see certain flowers or certain plants or whatever, and he'd say, anybody see an arrowhead? And he would, and they look, they don't see an arrowhead, and he'd say, it was almost like a magic trick. He'd sort of like stoop down and pull up an arrowhead from beneath the earth. And he's very good at that sort of thing. But the idea was to get in touch with nature, learn about nature, see the benefits of being in nature, health benefits as well as inspirational benefits. And he literally, for his own sake, would wander around the woods many days of the week for a full half day or 4 hours or something. Mm-hmm. When we all go hiking, most of us, we might go for like a half an hour or 40 minutes or whatever.
And call it really good.
He literally went for 4 hours and just what we call saunter. I think that's the word, sauntering around Walden Woods.
Hang on for this, because I want to do a little more diving into this part, Ken. There's a few things about what he did at the Academy that I want to extract for our listeners and viewers. So let's grab our last break, and then we'll keep talking about his Academy. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We're on the air with Ken Lizotte. He's the founder and CEO of Emerson Consulting Group, a consulting firm helping establish thought leadership to professionals of all types. We've been talking a bit about Henry David Thoreau's jaunt into entrepreneurship and the world of business. After the break, we're going to continue talking about what there is to learn from what he did with that academy. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us, and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. If you're just joining us, my guest is Ken Lizotte. He's the author of 8 books and the editor of an additional 2. Today, we're talking about Walden for Hire, Business Lessons from Henry David Thoreau. So one of the things I wanted to celebrate that I think also really speaks to what your whole point of writing the book is, what can we learn from how he lived and how he went through his life through enterprise, et cetera, and bring it into the world of business and leadership. And so just the very fact that when he started socializing his idea to the community about this academy, he referred to it, he said this would be a very progressive school, unlike that any had come before. And the very fact that he socialized it that way, I think is really compelling, right? Because talk about marketing, you have a whole section on how he was a marketer, a whole chapter on how he was a marketer. I think that's really compelling. So that's one of the points I wanted to raise. Also, too, of course, in his school, no corporal punishment, right? That was another distinguishing factor. He's like, That I know that's the norm out there. I got that, but we're not doing it that way. I'm going to do it my way. So those are a couple of things, if you want to comment on those. There's a couple of things that I really want to make sure that we called out that really speak to, I think, what we can learn today from the way he lived and worked.
Well, I think one thing that happened, I think, with him, and if you take the public school, whether he quit after 10 days, and then his school that he started it on his own, and he brought his brother, who also was a public school teacher, and had the same feelings about that, into being his partner. So they were running it together for a while. And I personally spent about 10 years previous to the business I have now, working with professionals around how they can make career transitions.
Yes.
And one of the things that I found seems to be true for people in the workforce is you have to know what you are. Are you an employee?
Yes.
Or are you an entrepreneur?
Yes.
And a lot of people who I would be coaching or put through my programs back then had been working as an employee at some sort of major company for maybe 20, 25, 30 years or something. And this was back in the 90s, and there was a panic or a recession, and they were all being thrown out of work, and there was right sizing, downsizing, all those buzzwords. And a lot of them said that two things: they wanted to do something on their own, they didn't want to go back to the corporate life, and they wanted it to have purpose. Speaking of working on purpose, that's what they wanted, and they understood that they had to be independent. So I learned from that we are either entrepreneurs or we're employees, and it's not one versus the other is not better than the other, but it's who you are, what you are. And if the fit doesn't feel right, there's no reason why you shouldn't do what Henry did and take yourself into creating a work lifestyle that works for you.
And speaking of that, I thought the way you described the way that Henry and his brother John worked together was so endearing. They really had a beautiful, and of course, the business lesson there was hire somebody who really is passionate about what it is that they're doing and for the organization. But of course, you also share that ultimately he disbanded the academy when his brother died because he was such an integral part of the academy operationally, et cetera. And it just really speaks a lot to what a relational soul he was too.
Right. Well, that's the thing is that they were very close. He cared a lot about his brother, and his brother had a freak accident where he got lockjaw from I think like a rusty razor blade or something, and he died in 3 days. And of course, people did get sick and die in 3 days, little kids and of all ages back in those days. So it was so devastating to Henry. He couldn't really go on, and he decided to close it down. So that's the sad thing about not only losing his brother, but losing this entrepreneurial venture that he was doing so well at.
Indeed.
He just decided to pick myself up, and what's the next thing?
And is that when he became more of a master surveyor, or were there things stops along the way before he got there?
The thing that happens next is that he goes to Walden Pond and he builds his cabin, and he what you read is what that was all about. You should find out what it is that matters to him. And that's when surveying got started. Not right away. Maybe it might have been the second year that he was there, but he had always had a sort of an interest in surveying. And back in those days, a lot of people became surveyors. People like George Washington was a surveyor, and
And what is a surveyor? So for our listeners and viewers who don't really know what that term means, what does a surveyor do?
What does it do?
A surveyor.
Yeah. Well, so here's one thing it does is it measures land and water and natural landscapes, and things like that. And he had a sense of what it did, but he didn't know it very well. And he decided that the best way for him to know it was to take on a project and create a project. So right there at Walden Pond, in the dead of winter, like right now, like February, and the ice is completely stiff, and he decided he was going to measure Walden Pond. Now, a lot of people at that time thought Walden Pond it didn't have a bottom, believe it or not, that it would, like, I guess, go to the other side of the globe or something.
Wow.
And it was just this, it was considered bottomless. So he says, I got to find out if it's bottomless. So he had some kind of homemade makeshift tools that he used, and he surveyed that the whole pond, everything from across from shore to shore, but also the bottom to the bottom, and to see how far it went. And don't ask me what the eventual measurement
number was. Yeah.
I don't remember if I even got that, but I think he did get it. So he did this thing that was on his own that helped him. What happened was he started to get these little jobs here and there. And a lot of times what it was working for, let's say, a farmer or a landowner that wanted to maybe make more money with their land by cutting down trees and selling for timberwood and things like that. But Henry had two things going on. One is that the surveying he liked because he liked to measure and he liked to investigate things and all of that. But also he liked to be outside. So it was a great compromise. And then the other part, when we get back to the morality, the inner core of who he was, he would take on jobs where the goal of his client was to have make as much money from the land as possible, which might mean devastating some of it. Again, a stand of trees or a beautiful rock formation or something, and he would fight with his client over it. No, that's not a good thing. We've got to have all these kinds of natural items, ingredients that make up who we are. And so anyway, but the point is the ultimate goal, to answer your question, would be to know exactly what you owned if you hired a surveyor, and what's the shape of it, and then it's sort of up to you to do what you wanted to do with it. But he was so good at it, and he cared about it so much, and he did it in such a way where his heart was in it. People recognized that, and as a result, by the time he was in his last few years of life, he was doing a lot of surveying, and he had been named the chief surveyor of Concord. He was that good. It didn't stop him from writing. Didn't stop him from writing poems. And by then he had his book, Walden, was finished and published. But surveying became a sort of a good compromise that could pay the bills, such as they were. And they weren't anything like what we were discussing before. Not for
Right. I think it's also really beautiful and endearing how you capture that toward those end of his life. And mind you, listeners and viewers, he passed at the age of 45. He wasn't an old man. Yeah. Maybe back in those days, I'm not sure. But I thought it was beautiful how you really shared too that his sister Sophia really took care of him. And as the care went along, she came to realize she could be a little more useful than just dusting and providing meals, etc. And she began to assemble his writings. So can you share a little bit about how that arrangement worked? What happened because of her work?
She like the rest of the siblings, was a teacher, and then I think had, I don't know, retired or decided to leave her teaching job in order to take care of Henry, because he was dying of tuberculosis, and it's a slow kind of a diminishment that apparently takes place. But they decided together that he had a lot of unfinished writings and a lot of work to be done to kind of collect them and organize them. And she was really good at that. And she dedicated herself to that. And then when he died, she then kind of like became his agent, his literary agent, even though he wasn't with us anymore, and went around to various potential publishers or editors or whatever, and got his work published, maybe more so than in his life. But that's what was going on. He was getting weaker and weaker, but she would sit him down in the living room on a couch and have the boxes of papers and go through it, and he'd probably get tired after a few hours, but she was definitely guiding the process. And one thing that does, by the way, when you go back to all the things he did in his life, including the cabin and writing, working on his book, Walden, which, by the way, took 9 years for him to write. 7 drafts, 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually it was done and it was published. And I have a chapter where we talk about the cabin. What did the cabin itself make any kind of profit? Did it exemplify Henry's business sense? And it did, not just because of the farming and the beans, but because using the cabin to write that book turned out to be such a bonanza. It's uncountable how much money has been made over the years. Doesn't go to him anymore.
Right.
But you can go into a book. There's a bookshop across the street from Walden Pond called the Shop at Walden Pond.
Mm-hmm.
Go in there and you're going to see books like mine and Little Women and all, and you're going to see various editions of Walden. It's so much money has been made over the decades because of what he did at that cabin. That itself was a big profitable enterprise. His sister helped a great deal.
Yes, so that speaks to get the right people on the bus, hire people that have talents and skills that you don't have, right? That really speaks to that beautifully. Well, we've managed to get through almost the whole amount of time here already, Ken, but I want to give you a chance to close the show as you like, say 20 seconds. What would you like to leave our listeners and viewers with?
I think that if I was going to leave everybody with something that this book could show them, it is pay attention to what you care about, as I was saying before, in terms of, are you an entrepreneur or an employee? What is it? What's the core of what you want to do that will fulfill you? But also, how can you maintain the kind of inner core morality that that caused Henry to give up a job after 10 days? I mean, that's a tough thing to do. Mm-hmm. But what was important to him in life guided him, and we don't always pay that much attention to that, much as we tried.
Thank you, Ken. I thoroughly enjoyed your book, and I'm very grateful to have met you and have you in the show. Thanks for being on Working on Purpose. It's a delight. And thanks for teaching me how to speak Boston sort of language. Hobbit, Concord, sort of.
And Henry David Thoreau.
Thoreau, indeed. Listeners and viewers, you're going to learn more about Ken Lizotte in his books, including Walden for Hire, and maybe the work he does at Emerson Consulting Group. So you can visit him at thoughtleader.com. thoughtleading.com. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast. We were on air with Dr. Vasu Tolia, a physician turned visual artist and international speaker who integrates her background in pediatric medicine with the transformative power of creativity. We talked about how organizations can use intentional art in the workplace to combat burnout and stress and increase focus and creativity. It was a wonderfully transportive conversation and will inspire you to consider how to incorporate art in your physical settings to amplify vitality for yourselves. Next week, we'll be on the air with Paul White, talking about the book he co-authored with Gary Chapman called The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace, Empowering Organizations by Encouraging People. You will gain a whole new understanding of the power of uniquely appreciating your people through their preferred style. See you then. Let's continue leaning into discovering how to elevate your operating system as a leader, become inspirational, and create destination workplaces where legendary business takes place. Let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.